Let's bring back now Ramesh Ponnuru and former Senator Doug Jones. We also welcome Lauren Leader. She's the co-founder and CEO of All In Together. Lauren, let me just start with you, because when you start lying about atrocities like the Holocaust and like 9/11, that's in a different category than padding your resume. And when you're lying about your own mother's death, this is different than somebody who's trying to just sort of make himself appear more qualified than he was.
I mean, it's not even in the ballpark of somebody embellishing their resume. I mean, there's literally nothing that we've been able to find just over the last 3 days in his entire life story or background that seems to be correct, credible, or even basically truthful. And some of this was known to New York Democrats in advance of the election. There is a lot of blame, I think, to go around when we start taking stock of how this guy got elected, because some of it is just so unbelievably outrageous. His financial issues are also one part of the picture. It's not just that we have lots of questions about how he lent his own campaign apparently $600,000 to $700,000, which is of course a violation of campaign finance law. There's questions about where that money came from and how it's possible that he was evicted from his home just a year before, owing $10,000 in back rent on an apartment that was apparently $2,500. I mean, literally, there's nothing about his story that makes sense, adds up, or is credible in any way. We have to assume at this point that everything he said publicly must be false.
It sure seems like it. Ramesh, why is it, on a larger issue, that Republicans are willing to settle for such deeply flawed candidates? I mean, some of the candidates are laughable. Some of them are so deeply flawed, like George Santos. I mean, between Herschel Walker, Doug Mastriano, this guy, George Santos, they can't find any Republicans that are more serious minded and sane and rational and qualified?
Well, I think that there are some big underlying issues that you raise, but Santos is a very special case in that, in a sense, he's a failure on the part of both parties, because neither party discovered all of this insanity on his part, all of this pathological lying, until after he had been elected. I mean, if I'm a Democratic campaign strategist, I am rethinking some of the money I spend on opposition research, not having uncovered this. And you do have to assume, I think, that had all of this come to light earlier, that Santos would not have won the Republican primary, let alone the general election. This is a guy you can't even trust him to, if he swears on his mother's grave, right? I mean, he will say anything for the most fleeting and momentary of advantages.
For sure.
Allison, I
Yeah,
gotta
go
say,
ahead.
they did have this Oppo research. So this is what makes this so interesting. And I completely agree that this is actually political malpractice on the part of New York Democrats. And I'm very involved in New York politics. I know a lot of the players. What I was told is that actually his campaign advisors, meaning Zimmerman's, did have some of this information. It was in a briefing book that came from the DNC. One of the issues was that they claimed that they could not get Long Island media to cover it. But I think the bigger issue is that they believed that his association with the January 6th riots, he claimed, one of his many claims was that he was at the Stop the Steal rally on the 6th, and that he financed he covered the legal bills of some of the protesters and rioters who were charged with crimes. So we'll see if any of those things are true. But the Democrats on Long Island that were supporting Zimmerman believed that that was disqualifying enough, and they focused on that in the campaign and ignored all of this other stuff that they actually did know about his background. They apparently didn't check on his degrees, but they knew that his financial dealings were shady. There were questions about his work experience. So this has exposed a huge problem in New York State Democratic politics. He's not the only race that won. This is the worst of it, but Democrats suffered huge losses all across New York and across Long Island. There's a lot of questions to be asked among Democrats here too.
Yeah, that's really interesting insight and really helpful, Lauren. Also, I just want to say there was a local newspaper that was reporting on him and that was highlighting it. I mean, shout out to local newspapers and why we need them so desperately. But you're right, the January 6th stuff got a lot more attention than all of this other crazy stuff. And Senator, pathological liar is an actual disorder in the DSM. I mean, there's many different theories about what causes it, but either way, I don't think you want your U.S. representative to suffer from it. And I know that Kevin McCarthy needs him for, to become speaker, but then isn't he just a huge liability? I mean, after he gets the vote to become speaker, do you want this guy hanging out in the House of Representatives?
Well, not only is he going to hang out, he's going to be an object of the media. Media are going to follow him every time they get the chance. And by the way, just as Lauren said, a note to the New York Democrats, nothing is disqualifying enough in today's political world. Nothing, no one issue is disqualifying enough. If you've got a lot, go for it, because you never can tell in tribalism that we've got in the voters these days that people will overlook so much and still vote for folks. But Kevin McCarthy's got a problem, not just with this guy, but he's got a major problem with George Santos. And I think that it's incumbent upon Republicans to speak out more than they're doing right now. It seems to me that they really need to call for his resignation. 5 years ago this year, I ran against a guy named Roy Moore. And Republicans, when all the issues came out about Roy Moore, there were actually Republicans saying, I'm not sure we're going to seat him. I'm not sure he should be elected. Senator Shelby said, I'm not going to vote for him. I'm going to write in a good Republican. Those days are over, Allison. We don't see that in the parties these more, especially with the Republican Party where things are right now. They need the vote. They need the gavel. And McCarthy's got a tough spot right now because he'll lose that seat, I believe, if there's another election.
I can't believe that was only 5 years ago. Did you say that was 5 years ago, the Roy Moore stuff? I can't believe it. Feels like a lifetime ago. I remember reporting on that, so much, virtually every day. And you're right. There was a feeling that this can't stand. And now something has changed. I mean, Ramesh, it's just we've come light years away from that. I mean, and again, to my question, do you agree that for Republicans, there's nothing disqualifying? I mean, he's lying to voters at this point.
Well, I think Republican voters, there's a significant number of them for whom these sorts of issues can be disqualifying. That's a reason why, for example, Mastriano didn't get as many votes as Oz in Pennsylvania. It's a reason why a lot of these Republicans who disappointingly didn't win, even while other Republicans were doing well, because voters distinguished between the Republicans who were reality-based and the Republicans who were pretending that Donald Trump won the 2020 election. So I take the senator's point about polarization having increased, but I don't think that we're quite as far gone as that. And I think actually the voters were pretty sensible in a lot of respects and are making some distinctions. The problem here was, notwithstanding some local media, I just think most voters were not aware of of just how much deception there was and how abnormal it was, right? I mean, it's one thing to say, oh, a politician will stretch the truth or pad his resume, but of course we're talking about something on a completely different level, and there just wasn't much understanding of that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's in a different solar system. Friends, thank you all very much. Really great conversation. Okay, now to this. She's